So a few years ago, I read Dr. Lonsdale's book, Thiamine Deficiency Disease, Dysautonomia, and High-Calorie Malnutrition. I also consumed a lot of articles from his website, hormonesmatter.com, and I also read plenty of the information that was put out on the internet by Elliot Overton, who speaks a lot and advocates highly of the supplementation of vitamin B1. I must admit, when I read a lot of this stuff to begin with, I honestly thought this would be the answer for those of us with long-standing autonomic issues, as these guys put some really convincing arguments across in helping to explain why so many of us had ended up with bodies that really struggle to self-regulate. So just to give you a little bit of background, a number of years ago, I was given IV antibiotics for a pelvic fluid collection whilst I was in hospital, and it ended up causing me an array of daily and debilitating symptoms which closely resembled the likes of POTS and dysautonomia, and this left me bedbound for a year and then housebound for the best part of the next 7 years. Every time that I stood up, I would experience extreme anxiety and panic with a racing heart rate and feeling as though I was about to faint. I experienced severe shortness of breath, where I had to take breaths in between every single sentence. I was extremely temperature sensitive, and also I had severe gut motility issues. And alongside this, I was experiencing tons of anxiety and panic, sleep issues, joint and muscle tightness and stiffness, and plenty of fatigue. So I was experiencing a number of autonomic symptoms, and it appeared as though I was a prime candidate to gain plenty of benefits from following this protocol. So I started off by taking a low dose of water-soluble vitamin B1, and that did nothing for me, so I upped the dose, and again that did nothing for me, so I added magnesium into the mix, and that made me far more symptomatic, so I removed that, and then I switched over to a fat-soluble version of vitamin B1 called benfotiamine, and again, that did absolutely nothing positive for me. All in all, I was supplementing with vitamin B1 for almost an entire year, and I didn't notice any symptomatic improvements between day one of starting the protocol and the final day about a year or so later. And so what I decided to do was to stop it altogether and continue to research to try to find a solution. And after a long time, I eventually came across something called functional neurology, where the main premise is identifying certain areas of neuronal dysfunction within our brain and nervous system, and then training these areas back up to working at levels that they were originally designed to function at. Unlike the vitamin B1 protocol, which holds the view that those of us with a chronic condition are inherently deficient or lacking something, functional neurology, for the large part, recognizes that those of us with a chronic condition might already have everything that we need to recover contained within us. It's just that certain neuronal inbuilt systems might not be performing optimally, and it's forcing our bodies into making tons of adaptations, which is draining its resources, and it's ultimately resulting in us becoming chronically symptomatic. Which really begs the question, should we be looking to give our body more of something, or should we be looking to optimize what our body already has to work with? Now, certain people will argue that supplementing B1 does in fact improve the function of your body, because you're providing your body with more energy at a cellular level, and then this in turn is allowing certain systems to start to function in a more efficient manner. However, whilst the theory is strong, and there are numerous cases of people who have reported significant improvement supplementing with vitamin B1, I myself experience absolutely zero benefits from doing so, and I've read plenty of comments and communicated personally with a number of people who have also reported experiencing no long-term benefits. Now, why I think this is, and why I believe that functional neurology is so powerful, is because according to neuron theory, a neuron requires 3 things to survive: glucose, oxygen, and appropriate stimulation. Now, the autonomic nervous system, or the ANS, is responsible for providing fuel in the form of glucose and oxygen to whichever tissue or cell in the body requires it. And the way it does this is by shunting blood around the body via blood vessels. However, the activity of the autonomic nervous system itself is closely regulated by signals that are fired down by the brain. And what these signals are completely dependent upon the information that the brain receives from its external environment. So external sensory information is received by the body and then sent to and processed by the brain. If there were to be a breakdown in communication or dysfunction with any of the structures or neural pathways that you can see in the diagram picture to the right of me, then what that would lead to is permanently undesirable outputs that the brain would fire into the ANS. And the consequence of this would be a body that really struggles to self-regulate and actually be able to handle any of the stresses of daily life. However, functional neurology can offer a possible solution to the problem, and the way it can do this is because with an extensive neurological examination, you can identify certain areas of dysfunction within your brain and nervous system, and then with very specifically targeted exercises, you can stimulate the specific area of the problem and then train it back up to functioning at a far more functional state. And by stimulating, you're sending oxygen and glucose to the area that needs it the most to help to encourage neuronal regrowth. And so you'll be targeting the weak link within your brain and nervous system and gradually be training it back up to a level that it was originally designed to function at. And this is going to help to bring your body back into a state of balance or homeostasis. Just imagine a scenario where you have one fish and there are 10 penguins stood in front of you. 9 of them have just eaten and they're absolutely stuffed. And one of them is very, very hungry and hasn't eaten all day, and it needs to eat in order to remain happy and healthy. Now you have 2 options. Either A, you cut up the fish into tiny little pieces and split it equally amongst the penguins, or B, you feed the entire fish to the penguin that's starving and needs it the most. So which option do you go for? B, right? And this is the exact reason as to why I believe that functional neurologic rehabilitation is far superior to the thiamine supplementation protocol, because what you're doing is instead of flooding your body with excess amounts of something that it may not require, you're strategically placing all of your efforts and you're delivering fuel to the area of your body that needs it the most. Just before I get into the second part of this video, if you did want to learn more about this in far more detail and fast track your own recovery in the process, then make sure to check out the Unbeatable Blueprint online course. This is where I've condensed information from over 20 pieces of complex literature into such an easily digestible format so that you too can obtain the same amazing long-term benefits that I have by applying functional neurology into your own life. After heavily researching this topic, I decided to go one step further myself and have a thorough neurological examination that was performed by a trained chiropractic neurologist in order to uncover any potential dysfunctions within my brain and nervous system. And it's fair to say that I was pretty surprised by what these guys ended up finding out. So over the previous decade, I suffered so badly with chronic fatigue, so much so that I had to spend between 90 to 95% of every single day lying down on my side. Now, my first impression after reading up about the importance of vitamin B1 was that my cells were deficient in thiamine and it was causing them to not produce enough energy, which was what was keeping my body chronically fatigued. However, in reality, almost the opposite was what was going on. and there was actually too much neuronal activity occurring within my central nervous system. This increased amount of neuronal activity that was being produced by my brain was causing excess movement and activity within my internal organs. It was producing movement that shouldn't have been being produced, too much movement, and that was leading to an array of undesirable symptoms in multiple regions in my body. This included the likes of an increase in heart rate, increased unconscious respiratory rate, increased gut motility with cramping and spasming, increased reflexes, and heightened immune system activity amongst a whole host of other variables. And the reason why there was hyperactivity occurring throughout my body was because there wasn't sufficient amounts of inhibitory firing coming down into the brainstem, which then in turn was resulting in heightened and erratic autonomic nervous system activity. This inhibition should occur when the cortex, which are these two big lobes at the top of our brain, fire down into the part of the brain just beneath it called the basal ganglia. And in the basal ganglia, what should be being produced is inhibitory neurotransmitters, which in turn help to calm down the excitable behavior that occurs within the brainstem. However, in order for this whole series of events to successfully occur, it's entirely contingent upon the cortex receiving accurate and adequate amounts of sensory information from the sensory division of our peripheral nervous system. So once certain sensory receptors are identified as being dysfunctional or hypotonic, meaning that they're just not functioning up to the standards that they should be functioning at, which in my case was identified during this extensive neurological examination, then certain very specifically targeted exercises can actually be prescribed in order to strengthen these weak pathways. And subsequently for me, the knock-on impact of doing this was normalization or balancing out of neuronal activity that was occurring within my brain, which then in turn calmed down the hyperactivity of organs and processes that were occurring throughout my body. So one very important thing that I took away from my own situation was that my extremely low energy levels weren't coming about because my body had a deficiency in energy production, but because my body was expelling so much more energy just carrying out very basic physiological tasks. So in my case, adding more energy into the mix would have been counterproductive, which was probably why I wasn't observing any real benefit whilst I was supplementing with thiamine for almost a year. And I believe this is one of the key reasons as to why so many other chronic illness sufferers aren't noticing any long-term benefits either by following that protocol. Have a look at the video I made a couple of weeks ago about how I recovered from POTS in a month, because after watching that video, I think it will make a lot more sense to you as to why supplementing with vitamin B1 just wouldn't have been enough for me to recover. However, one thing I do want to point out was that in my case, my issue was more centrally in origin, meaning that my central nervous system wasn't being sufficiently inhibited, and that was what was leading to neuronal hyperactivity. There are other situations that could occur where you have an issue with the peripheral of your nervous system, where it may have become damaged and you may have actually lost the signaling that gets sent into your spinal cord, and there just isn't enough neuronal activity being produced. And I think if this were to be the case, then supplementing with vitamin B1 could offer you more benefits, as you're helping to re-establish lost connections with how part of your peripheral nervous system actually communicates with your brain, and you're helping to encourage nerve regrowth. But either way, I think investigating the issue on a bit of a deeper level by having an extensive neurological examination is still the best way to go about things, as this should allow you to identify the key dysfunction within your nervous system and hone in on the specific area that's actually creating the myriad of chronic symptoms that you're experiencing. I do just want to end this by saying, though, that I think those who are putting out information regarding vitamin B1 and the benefits that it offers for the human body are doing a fantastic job with all the research that they're providing. So I just want to applaud them on all of their efforts. And please, if you're somebody who has tried the protocol, leave me a comment down below, because I'm really interested to know, has it offered you any benefits, or are you yet to experience any positives from following it?